Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and welcome to another episode during Women's History Month this year. I go by she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm here with Dr. Lisa. How are you doing?
I am doing well, thanks. My pronouns are she, hers. Well, I'm doing well, other than today, the day we are recording, is the day that the Supreme Court of the United States said that 45 could not be taken off of the primary ballot. We are one day before Super Tuesday, so yay.
I saw that. Yes. Big thud when I saw that.
Yeah, yeah. Wasn't 100% surprised, but still had a
Right.
little bit of hope.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Keeping hope alive. I hear
Yeah,
you. I hear you.
yeah.
Well, look, we have stuff to talk about, especially during this Women's History Month, and it just happens to relate to girls in this
Hmm.
phase one. So, Lisa, I've shared with you, and I will share with our listeners, watch the news on TV, like live TV. I can't even remember the last time I've watched the news. And I realized that my substitute for the news is Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Now, I know that that is less than reliable, y'all. So please don't critique me on that. But what I found interesting, this was a few nights ago. I was scrolling through, and I landed on the LA Lakers page, and the Lakers page had a girl dad night. Now, anyone who knew Kobe Bryant knew he had a rack of girls. His daughter Gianna unfortunately lost her life in the very same accident where he passed away. And so it does make sense, and it is on brand for the Lakers, especially given how much respect they give to Kobe in their franchise, to have a girl dad night. And so Girl Dad Night was Saturday, March 2nd, because the game was on a Saturday night, March 2nd. That happens to be Trey's birthday. And so they decided to do a Girl Dad Night contest where people could submit a 30-second video telling the Lakers franchise about their father daughter relationships. They even had little snippets of current players talking about their father daughter relationships and how it reflects some of the core values of the Lakers. And I found it so interesting because I would probably suggest that if I asked my dad would probably say he's a girl dad. If we lived in that area or if he wanted to catch a game on that night, then he probably would want to go with me. Yet at the same time, if this is calling attention to girls and women in society, it gives me the warm fuzzies, yet it doesn't give me the warm fuzzies. Because again, how many times have we said, Lisa, that proximity should not always have to be the brokering chip of conversations around the value of women and girls? And so I just think this whole thing is fascinating. I mean, I have a lot of different ways for my brain to go, but when you hear something like this, girl dad night, I mean, obviously, yes, it's very commercial and dot, dot, dot. I'll just leave it there.
Well, actually, now I'm putting some dots together, and the Lakers played in Denver on Saturday night, I think. And the only reason I know this
Yep.
is because
Yep.
I think the Denver Nuggets won, but
That's right.
LeBron James did 40,000 points or something, right?
Yep. Yep.
So,
That's it.
okay, so I've heard about that, but not about the fact that it was also a girl dad night. That's interesting now that I've put those together. But I don't know. I mean, I know nothing about the NBA. I don't follow it at all. But I agree with you. I don't. I mean, I know that the girl in Girl Dad is referring to young girls, right? It's not referring to women. You know how sometimes women are referred to as girls. Hate that.
Right.
But
Exactly.
this is
Yep.
actually referring to girls. But I still don't love that term, and I kind of feel like slightly different to the proximity piece. But like, why do we need to carve out and kind of specifically identify girl dad, because you don't have boy dad, right? Like, so the assumption therefore is the norm is for dads to be more supportive of boys. So we need to therefore call out the exception, which is when dads are supportive of girls, because that's usually absent. So there's something a bit weird there for me in the way that we're kind of marking that, which without
Yeah.
also saying this is a huge problem. Dads are not as supportive of girls as they are as boys, particularly when it comes to sport, right? Like that's a cultural problem.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, in terms of the proximity, like it shouldn't matter whether you have a child who identifies as a girl or a niece or a mother or a sister. Yeah, I mean, we run into this same issue when we're talking about violence against women and girls, right? Like, you shouldn't
Uh,
suddenly start caring about it because there's someone in your life who could be harmed. You should just care about it because it's a problem, right?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, I think about a number of different things and how gender roles and parental roles play a part in things because girl dad and boy mom started to have this kind of labeling. I consider myself a boy mom, but also I think about how mothers and daughters, oftentimes the phrasing also goes together. So I think there's something to that gender role of, well, of course, the mother is going to be connected to the child no matter what, but this dad piece is a little different because it's a surprising notion that a dad is connected to a daughter, right? When it shouldn't be. There's been dads that have been very close to their daughters for quite a long time. Now, if you want to put it in sport, that adds another layer that I don't even think is here, but should be here. Um, and Lisa, at risk of folks talking about us harping too much on Taylor Swift, let me be clear on that. They've already projected numbers about how many girls were drawn to American football because of Taylor Swift attending games. And so I'm thinking to myself at the same time, nah. I mean, yeah, if you want to give her okay, if you want to show causality with Taylor Swift, then fine. But I know many, many, many women that have been following football for decades. They just haven't gotten the recognition or they just haven't been thought about when it comes to sport at all. And so they're just now being acknowledged in marketing and publicity in events and so forth. But it's again, it's when you choose to acknowledge those folks, not that they've never been there. And so I feel like
Yes.
these types of
Yes.
relationships, girls and their dads, those relationships, they've been there, but some kind of way Kobe made it cool or someone else made it cool. And so now it seems like an opportunity for sports franchises to blow it up in such a way that's beneficial to them. I think it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and it's like an exception, right? It's not
Yes.
being normalized,
Yes.
it's being exceptionalized. And I think that that
Right.
is problematic. And I didn't know about boy mom. I did not know that that was a thing, but that also feels weird to me. Um, and then I'm also thinking like the term daddy's girl. So is girl
Oh yeah.
dad a more modern iteration of daddy's girl, or does it mean something different in our culture? Like, does girl dad mean more like rah rah, I support my girl, my daughter, in a more feminist sense, whereas daddy's girl feels a little more derisive or infantilizing? I don't know.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
thought about that.
Yeah. Real paternalistic on the daddy's girl because when I hear it, my ears hear it in two different ways. When you say daddy's girl, it's the daughter is being protected and kept from certain forms of harm, but also things that aren't feminine. Whereas girl dad is, I'm a dad that's down for whatever my girl wants to do. Like I hear it in completely different ways. So girl dad does sound more empowering and daddy's girl sounds more infantile. Yeah, it's not the same power going in the same direction in my brain. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm wrong, but
No, I feel differently about the terms too, right?
yeah,
But then you're also like, girl dad is also a statement of fact. Like, I am the dad of a girl, right? But like, it's not, same with boy mom, like, you are the mother of boys. But it
right,
doesn't,
right, right.
it's not, that's not what it is. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't have, I mean, I'm guessing that the NBA doesn't have boy mom nights, right?
I doubt seriously. I doubt seriously. I mean, somebody write in and prove us wrong, but I doubt seriously. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And your point about women and girls watching American football is well taken, because I was watching in the run up to the Super Bowl, there was a whole piece around advertisements, which is where I learned like a 30-second ad cost like $7 million or something like that.
Yes.
But
Yes.
but the newscaster was like, so you've got a lot of advertisements, commercials that are oriented or geared towards women. Is that because of the Taylor Swift thing, right? And the person that they were interviewing was like, well, no, women and girls have been massive watchers of American football for decades. They've just not been noticed. They basically said what you just said.
Thank you.
And that, so these aren't commercials that are particularly geared towards women because something changed, right? There's just a recognition that women have always been there, and now maybe we should actually, this is a marketable group of people we should pay attention to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm.
No, that makes complete sense because I remember when I I'd first moved here into the Maryland area, didn't really have a team per se. At the time, my then husband, the boy's dad, is originally from Baltimore, obviously Baltimore Ravens country, up and down this particular area. It's kind of weird because we're here with the Washington Commanders, and then we also have the Philadelphia Eagles. Like we're all kind of inundated in this little corridor, right? And so I remember we were going to our first Ravens game, and I'm thinking, I don't have anything to wear. Like, I mean, I don't have anything. I don't have anything with Ravens on it, nothing. And I remember him giving me, which I think I still have in my closet right now, a Ravens jersey, it was a white Ravens jersey. Now, the Ravens colors are purple and black, a white Ravens jersey, but it had pink print on it. So Ray Lewis's number and name and all of that was in pink on the jersey. And I've seen that. Well, let me take this back. I've noticed it. It probably was already there, but I've noticed it more often where, whatever the team's colors are, whether they're pro team, college team, what have you, they'll still have a pink area because they want to attract us. And we know what the whole pink tax conversation is about. But I just think it's interesting how pro teams are still, uh, I, I can say it jokingly, but still true, fumbling the ball with figuring out how to incorporate women and girls into sport when we're already there. Like oh, you're here.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I would love to see the numbers on how many women actually buy tickets, go to games, go to support, all these other things. I mean,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
it's there. It's there. It's just when they choose to notice us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have a whole soapbox about pinkifying things to attract women, but that is for
Pinkifying,
that is for
especially
another time.
especially when it's more expensive because Lisa, I think I've
Yes.
told you that before when I've looked for certain things and I specifically wanted that item in pink, partially because I like pink, but also my sorority colors are pink, y'all. And so I'll look for something that's pink. And
Uh-huh.
if you're shopping online, you know how you'll pick a different color and the
Yeah.
price
Yeah.
changes with the color? I countless times, countless
Yeah.
times. I chose pink. I'm like, okay, well, I might as well go with black or some other color that's
Hmm.
probably the more masculine color that they're not going to add the pink tax to. It's just maddening.
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 Yes. Well, on that maddening note, let's transition to phase two. This one is a humdinger.
Oh, yes.
So we had a listener email us an article that they had come across, a blog post that was related to renting white privilege for a day. So it was written by a woman of color who was basically articulating that she's tired, she's exhausted, it's scary to go outside because of the risks to her health and well-being, and kind of the racial weathering that happens. And so wouldn't it be great if she could just rent white privilege for a day? So like you could have a marketplace of white people where they would say, hey, 47-year-old white female available to go to the grocery store or something like that, so as to limit the exposure she, as a woman of color, has to a racist society to preserve her mental health. And so obviously it was tongue in cheek, obviously it was satirical, but I thought it was thought provoking. And Shauna, you read it too, and so I'm wondering what your thoughts were on it.
Oh goodness. Well, when I read the article, the first thing I thought about was this movie that I watched a couple years ago called The Banker, and I believe it was on Apple. But The Banker did something similar in that you had, I believe it was at least two black men that were attempting to buy a bank building, and they were not trying to work with these two black men, and they were into real estate. They had been buying up all kinds of homes and everything else. So this is their first time going into commercial real estate property. And so they had a partner, a white male who wasn't even on a partner level, frankly. He wasn't a real estate agent or a realtor or any of that. He was just kind of as the assistant, but he was the available white man to put on his nice suit and walk in and negotiate the selling of this bank. And it went smoothly. The paperwork was signed, and before the white sellers could even realize that two black men had purchased his bank, it was too late. It was too late to negotiate. It was too late to back out of it. It was too late to show how they really felt about black folks during this day and age. And that's what that reminded me of, is how many times does this happen on a regular basis? Like, we even saw this one time, Lisa, where we talked about, I think on the podcast, around just regular old, residential real estate, where a couple did a research study on redlining and some other things, but specifically on discrimination in home for home buyers, and how magically the property value was like double what it should have been because they thought white people lived there. I'm like, really? And so, I just think it's very interesting that this was satirical, ha ha ha, but at the same time, it does happen in everyday real life where there are folks who aren't seeking compensation, but they are the stand-ins because folks are anticipating a challenge. Like, I'm even thinking about friends of mine who have relatively gender neutral names, and they're going into situations that are highly gendered, and because the woman's name is Corey, nobody picks up on it until after she's already gotten the job or whatever, what have you. And so I'm just thinking about all the different ways where we have to broker privilege, and some of us do it actively, very actively. And so I just thought that whole thing was interesting. I do think it reinforces the privilege of someone paying you for what you already have as privilege. I'm like, that sounds like double jeopardy
Yeah,
type of situation, but yeah,
yeah,
it's something to think about, especially
yeah.
for
It's
white
interesting
folks
because
reading the article.
yeah, because I saw the movie The Banker too, right? And
Yes.
there's a difference in it for me. I mean, that was kind of a utilitarian. These white people, I forget when that movie was set, the 50s and 60s maybe, or earlier than that. I can't remember. Um, and they could not buy property as black men, right? So there was a transactional use to it. I don't think the white guy was paid necessarily, but this blog was more about relieving the author of the emotional strain of having a black body. Well, actually, I say that I don't know if she identifies as African American, having a
Yeah.
woman of color body in a white supremacist society, right? So it wasn't so
Mhm.
much around, I realize I can't sign a contract or I can't sell my house for that, for the value that it's worth. It was more like, I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore because the culture isn't changing, right? And I wonder, like, I think,
Yeah.
well, I can't speak for all white people, obviously, but I do think that that's a difference. I think there are a significant number of white people who understand that there is discrimination in employment, in education, in housing that kind of manifests in a maybe contractual or valuation type way. But I don't think that there is a level of analysis from white people that goes all the way to think about, well, what is the emotional and physical and kind of health impact of experiencing that in the day to day. And so just going to the grocery store could involve, being pulled over by the police or being looked at strangely by
Yeah.
someone in the grocery store or being accused of something or being
Yes.
assumed, like when we've heard about women of color in grocery stores who have a biracial child or a child who appears white and they're assumed to be the nanny versus the parent, right? Things like
Oh
that.
yes. Oh yes.
You
Oh
know,
yes.
so that I thought was
Absolutely.
just that for me was thought provoking, like taking that kind of white allyship. If you take the money out of it, right? Taking the white allyship to a different level in terms of what does it really mean to be there for your friends of color to relieve that emotional burden versus, access to something.
Yes, yes. And let me add that the other piece of the emotional burden. I'm imagining folks that are trying to think logically through this process, especially if you're a white person, listen to this part of the podcast. If you are saying, well, how do we know it's race? Or how do we know it's gender? Or how do we know it's whatever identity? You are adding to the exhaustion of the people that are experiencing it. Because if someone has to justify their experience, especially when we have enough history to justify that this is a very real possibility, you posing the question of logic is taxing and exhausting. Well, Lisa, how do we know someone was discriminating against you because you're a woman? Because, it could have just been da da da. Just posing that is fucking exhausting, y'all. We probably have to put an R rating. Sorry. We're going to have to put an R rating on this particular podcast, but it's worth it. It's exhausting because you're both having to experience whatever the discrimination is.
Yeah.
Then, and Lisa, you let me know because this sounds very parallel to a lot of experiences with people who have had some type of violence against them, where they have to experience it first. Then they have to get up the courage to tell someone about that experience. And once they do get the courage to share that experience is questioned. And so then they have to go through this labor of proof that they don't have the energy for. It sounds extremely exhausting. And so, as the 40 plus year old Black woman that's seen enough to know, I've had that share of my lifetime where I felt like I needed to explain, 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 give enough information so that I can convince said white, male, etc. person that this really happened to me. I'm now at the place, and I've been at that place for
Right.
many years, that I, I just simply don't do it anymore. And not that I don't share with my friends and family
Mm-hmm.
and loved ones
Mm-hmm.
who I don't have to explain to. Like if I called anybody that's listening to this podcast right now, if I said some crazy foolishness happened in the grocery store with me and I called Lisa to tell her about it, there would be no convincing. She'd be like, "Yep, I'm fairly sure. Yep, absolutely, it happened." But to anyone else who would not believe the experience or at least support that individual as they're experiencing it, it's exhausting. And so, I guess my quest is to encourage people to stop uh putting people on the witness stand to prove that they've
Right.
experienced something.
Yeah. Yep. 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 Yeah.
That's a lot.
I mean, yeah, it's the gaslighting, right? And I think that,
Absolutely.
as satirical or tongue in cheek as this piece was, I think it gets at a really important central point of what it means to not have a majority identity in the United States and other countries, right? So it could be disability, it could be race, it could be gender. I mean,
Yes.
this person was obviously talking about race and white privilege, but what would it mean to walk through the world and not have that, but not have to carry that burden, right? And so
Yes.
this, this whole piece was kind of supposing that where a white person would be a stand-in, but it relieves that individual of the immediate damage that they experience being out in the world, but it doesn't change the damage out in the world, right? Like it just creates a break in that cycle. So,
That's right. That's right. That's right.
it made me think of a little bit. There's right in 2020, after 2020, there was an organization that came to fruition called Race to Dinner, and there might be other versions of it. This one was out of Denver, and I know they do events nationwide, but essentially it was designed to have bring a group of white women to dinner. The women of color who started the organization or their affiliates would attend the dinner, and it would be an opportunity to have a very direct, raw conversation about racial privilege and what it means to be a white woman versus a woman of color in the world, and really confront the ways in which white women are complicit in holding up white supremacy, right? Like the kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
invitation to white patriarchy that they are presented with. I didn't
Right.
come up with
Right.
that. Ida Hurtado came up with that. I've always loved that phrase. But
Right.
um, and one of the questions I think that came out of that dinner, and I may be misremembering, but it was something related to one of the dinners. It went viral or whatever, that a white woman or the white women around the table were asked, "Would you switch places with a woman of color?" And I
Uh,
think of the like 10 women that were there, like two people said that they would. Or there was like this big kind of pregnant pause where the white woman had to think about it, because they know, right? Like I know that if my skin color were different, I would experience my experience in the world would be very different and far more exhausting and far more painful, right?
oh yeah.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
thought that was, so it just made me think of that too, in the ways in which this is a known quantity, it's just not said out loud.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and it kind of reminds me of, I forget who said it, but it was something to the effect of, um, it's it's a privilege to become an old African American male in this country. And I'm like, of course it is. Of course it is. Because look at
Yeah.
everything that
Yeah.
exists in the system, which, goes back to this whole phase around, yeah, you get a break from the system, but the system isn't going anywhere. You got to come back out to the system again. You don't get to stay away from ever. It's a little reprieve, it's a little holiday, it's a little vacation, but you still have to come back to it. And therein lies the privilege in that white folks, people of color, white folks, able-bodied folks, straight folks, y'all don't you can provide a brief break, but you don't have to return back to a reality that's always going to be harmful to your
Right.
lived experience.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
don't. Just
Float
don't.
in and out of it. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Well, look, Lisa, let's talk about, since we already talked about taking a break, let's talk about taking a real break of phase 3. Let's talk about retiring from DEI, right? Um, and the reason why I'm bringing this particular topic up is because I follow a woman on LinkedIn who's been doing a really great job pulling together DEI resources for those of us who are DEI professionals. Obviously, we have a specific type of burnout that we experience, especially doing this work. And so recently, she sent an email out to her listserv, which I'm on, and posted on her LinkedIn page that after 14 years of DEI work, she's recently decided to move on, and with that, she gave some resources as to, these are going to be housed here, so you can always access these resources, but I need to move on to different things because this is extremely taxing on me and my life and my world. And I'm thinking to myself, oh Lord, it's going into 27 years and I'm still here, y'all. And right, there's no exit hatch, right? It's no exit hatch at all, Lisa. So it's like, where's the exit hatch? But when I look at that 14 years and, when you look at especially where I came from in higher ed, and specifically DEI in higher education, you know, 5 to 7 years is like max because people are like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need to go into something else. And so to see these shorter time frames compared to my own experience, I think it's so interesting because I want to like stand up and applaud these folks that are saying enough already. Enough. I'm not, I'm tired. Maybe it's the right time. There's been such a major assault on DEI initiatives across the country that it's not that they're giving up hope because no one has said that, but they have simply said for their own welfare, going back to your point about weathering, they've decided I'm opting out of the weathering. I'm not doing this anymore. Enough already. And so, given that, you know, I was thinking to myself, if I had hit year 14, I'm not quite sure what else I would do. Like, I mean, would somebody plop me in the middle of a sociology department and I would teach there for the rest of my life? I don't know, but I just think it's very interesting that DEI folks have very uniquely curated specific skills that don't always neatly fit in everywhere all the time, yet DEI is everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I'm just thinking about what her next steps were. What would I do if I were in her position? I'm not quite sure, but I thought it was a curious email to receive.
Where is she in her life? Like, do you know roughly what age she is?
Early 30s, early 30s.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah,
she, I think, yeah, okay, because I'm thinking, well, depending on the point at which you take that step back, you're going to encounter a whole other bunch of things, especially as a woman, right? Because
absolutely.
the ways in which ageism plays in and how, you're not considered valuable because you have all this life experience, you're just over the hill or whatever, right?
Right,
um
right, right, right,
but
right,
she's in her early 30s, and I was listening to a podcast several months ago related to a change, people who change professions or their career kind of midlife, but the woman that they interviewed was like 31 or something, and I'm like, that no, that's not the same. Like, I want to
no,
hear
it's
from women
not.
in their 40s or early 50s who decided they want to change their career, because that feels very different, because like you're leaving the profession of DEI at 31 or 32 versus 52. Like, the
That's right.
what options you have ahead of you feel very different, um, in the
For
ways
sure.
in which you can market those skill sets that you've developed through the DEI work to an employer who is probably looking mostly at your age, right? Or your
Right.
perceived age. So that
That's right.
is an interesting kind of caveat or slice to think about there. But I'm also wondering, given everything that's happening with DEI right now, folks, listeners may have seen the University of Florida, in accordance with the new Florida law, basically laid off um, their entire DEI department, and any person, I think 12 faculty lost kind of
Yeah,
administrative appointments related to that. So there's a
yeah,
significant number of people at the University of Florida that are no longer able to work in that
yeah,
space because you cannot use state dollars to fund diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives per state law now. And the article I was reading said something about how the university was encouraging those people to apply internally for another position, and they would expedite their application, right? So the woman that you're talking about has made a choice. 14 years, I kind of want to step back and go in a different direction. But these
yeah,
folks at the University of Florida and other institutions where the same thing is happening are kind of being booted out, like without making that choice for themselves. So then you're thinking, well, what am I going to do in a state that doesn't appreciate DEI, actually prohibits the application of DEI programs and expertise in certain
yeah,
contexts? So it's like, I feel like that that what do you do, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that's the thing. It's so, yeah. I have a sorority sister of mine that works there, and I haven't gotten an opportunity to talk to her to find out exactly what's going on and if her role is okay and so forth. But, releasing a bunch of folks, they get 12 weeks of pay. They're encouraged to apply for other positions by a certain date. Um, and for me, I think it's very interesting. The first thing I thought of was because, for example, in my role, in my DEI role, it was a dual appointment. So it was both administrative and also faculty. And so, what if you have someone who is a tenured faculty member who's in a DEI role where you can't let them go, but you can change their trajectory? What does that mean for those folks? So that's one thing I was thinking of. Um, and then the other thing, if I woke up here, God forbid, in Maryland, um, my great state that I tell y'all all the time, I have a black mayor, I have a black governor, and I have a black airport. Okay, so I think I'm okay for now. But if I woke up to a Florida situation, I truly don't know exactly what I would do other than possibly work for an organization that's a private organization that has an emphasis on DEI, which may not be able to, compensate me what I have been before or benefits or what have you. And so I would really have some really thoughtful moments about what my options were. And we haven't even talked about the mental health of these folks that have been pretty much,
Right, right.
displaced in their
Yeah.
role, which I think should be thought about, of course.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's very interesting to me that we're in a country now that has to think about such issues. There's also one school that I was tracking as well. I'm trying to remember the name of the school. I can't remember, forgive me all. But all of that going on, and then you have other offices where they're literally being shut down, doors locked, chains put on the doors for speaking of Palestine and Gaza, for even speaking of it, for even having student-led or faculty-led conversation about what's going on there. So it just seems to be that it's this big I don't know if it's a house of cards that's caving in because we want it to, and then people are retiring by force or by, feeling as if it's no other option. I don't know, but I have a feeling that we're going to be joined
Yeah.
by a lot of consultants that do our work, Lisa, because they're probably going to have to look for work in different ways that they probably have not
Yeah.
imagined in the past.
And it's a little bit like a cycle, right? So the climate that has created
Yeah,
these prohibitions on spending state money on DEI is the same climate that is creating emotional challenge and health and wellness concerns for people who are working in that space. So
yeah,
then
yeah.
yeah, so it's just like it feels like it's just ramping up, right? Like
That's
the
right.
culture
That's
gets
right.
worse, and so then more people get tired and decide to like voluntarily leave that sector.
Yes.
But at the same time, because the culture is getting worse, then you're seeing people such as the University of Florida folks who are getting ousted from their positions, right? And
That's right.
so,
That's right.
coming back to your very initial point, is then what do you do with those skills that are very unique and particular and take time to hone? And
Yeah,
if you don't want to leave the state, right? Like it's one thing to say, I'm done, I'm tired, I would like to move on to something else, and I'm 31. But I work at the University of Florida and I'm 57 years old and I've been doing this for 27 years and I still have a passion for it, but now I can't do it in the state of Florida. But my family is
exactly.
here. I still have younger
Exactly.
kids here, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that is the flippant response that I just despise when people say, "Oh, well, they just need to move." And I'm like, it's not that simple, y'all. If someone said to me right now as a divorcee with two children that I'm co-parenting, "Oh, just up and move," you have no cognizance at all of what that means and how complicated people's lives are and families are when it comes to that, or moving closer or further away from folks that you're a caretaker for, if you have elderly parents, grandparents, whatever it may be. All of that is much more complicated than, oh, just move to another state that you can do what you do. It's not that simple. It's just not. And so, it kind of reminds me of, Lisa, when we talked about during one episode around necessary entrepreneurship. You remember when we talked about that, where it was like the
Mhm.
pandemic, and a
Yeah.
lot of women of
Hmm.
color were saying, I don't want to commute anymore. My employer is forcing me to come back in. I've had some aha moments that make me value things differently. And so instead of being forced to go back to work, 5 days a week, when my job is proven that I can actually do it at home and do it better at home sometimes, I'm choosing the necessary route of entrepreneurship in order to create that flexibility for myself that my employer won't give me. I got a feeling some of that type of entrepreneurship is going to blossom in some of those areas. And so they may end up becoming very similar to what we do, Lisa, where we have a lot of virtual work that we do all around the country. I hope and pray a lot of those opportunities head down to our colleagues down in Florida that do what we do, but they may see no other way. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I don't really want to go back to a university that folds
Yeah.
under the pressure around DEI in another role. No,
Exactly.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I would want to go back there.
Right. Well, and also what jobs are available. Like you can apply for jobs in the university. We encourage you to do so and we'll expedite that process. But what if there's like nothing available that I want to do? I'm just supposed to like go, okay, I'll apply for this job administrating this program that I don't care about. So
Well,
I can put food on the table. Like,
and
I mean, it's
see,
horrible.
well, and that's one thing that I think is very racialized too, the difference between necessary work and passion work, because for people of color in certain communities, it's never been about
Yeah.
passion work
Yeah.
initially.
Yeah.
Now,
Great point.
and I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I pray that everyone gets there, but a lot of times it has been, okay, well, I have to do this because I have no choice. So, here I am still administering, I don't know. They might be a DEI person like me who is really poor at Title IX, but I'd have to do Title IX or at least apply for
Right.
that because that's the closest thing to what I used to do.
Yeah.
I hate it. I'm not an attorney, but it pays the bills and keeps the lights on.
Mhm. Mhm.
I have no passion around that, but here I am. What choice do I have? There's going to be some folks
Yeah.
like that too.
Oh, there's also almost certainly going to be some folks like that, right?
Which
Yeah,
wonderful
yeah.
for morale.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, good luck with that, University of Florida.
Hello,
I will
exactly.
continue my boycott of that state. So, all right, I think that's a wrap for phase three. So, another loaded episode. Lots of things to chew on. But how can folks get a hold of us if you want to send us some really interesting blog posts rather that we could digest on this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you. Shout out and thank you to Tara for sending us the article specifically on privilege and renting out privilege for a day. Thank you for that. But folks, please send us things that you want us to discuss. You can send those to our email address, info@unfazedpodcast.com. You can go to YouTube and find us there, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, you name it, LinkedIn, you can find us all over. So please reach out to us if there are curious things that you would like for us to talk about in relation to DEI. And of course, do all the things, y'all. Don't just listen, but be active listeners. Okay. So do all the things. Subscribe, leave a review for us. Share this with your friends and coworkers. There may be some things that are popping up. I know my higher ed friends who are listening right now are probably thinking, yeah, I might want to share this UF phase here. Please share it with your coworkers or any other folks in this phase of your life. So, Lisa, until next week.
All right, see you soon.